Hello. My name is Eric Holmes, and I have the pleasure of serving as Vancouver City Manager. I've been in this role for about 13 years, and I've been with the City of Vancouver for about 16 years, and I have been working in the greater Clark County area in a variety of public leadership roles for more than 25 years. A little bit about Vancouver. We are second largest city in the greater Vancouver Portland metropolitan area. Our corporate population is about 200,000 people. Our direct service population, which includes areas outside the city limits that we serve with direct municipal services, is about 300,000 people. And we have been growing very rapidly, adding between 3,500 and 5,000 people a year, every year, for about the last decade. When we look to the next 3 to 6 years, the pipeline of development in Vancouver is expected to add about 25 to 30,000 more people, just based on permits that are in the queue and being reviewed or under construction right now. So we're a larger community, a lot of change happening, and a lot of pressures resulting from that change. So with that context, Vancouver, I'll turn it over to Nichole to introduce herself.
Thank you. My name is Nichole Rutherford. I am the city manager for the city of Coos Bay. I've been in this role for approximately 3 months, though I've been with the city for a little over 9 years, walking the finance director path to my current role. Coos Bay is the largest city on the Oregon coast. We come in at a little over 16,000 individuals in our city. We're similar in that we do have a populace kind of, right outside of city limits that we are providing services to. And that maybe brings us up to around a 20,000 mark. Being the largest city on the coast, we, of course, are the location for healthcare, and we have a community college here. So we do regionally, we have a larger populace that we're serving here in our area. Growth is happening, not to the degree we'd hope it happened. We do have several housing developments in line, and without those, we won't be able to support what we believe we need is, another 600 homes in the next 20 years. So.
What we hope to accomplish today is to offer a couple of perspectives, one from a little bit larger community in the metro area, one from a smaller but significant community in the Oregon coast and a more rural area, about our perspectives on really the convergence of a few factors that impact how we manage and respond to homelessness: the Martin v. Boise decision, the housing crisis, pandemic, and then the current addiction and fentanyl crisis. And we hope you will come away with from this session with a few objectives achieved. One is understanding the tension and nuance between what our communities expect and what their understanding and awareness is of homelessness, its limited solutions, and how we navigate the politics of that. Some practical approaches that we've been taking in each of our communities and the underlying philosophies and how those have delivered some positive results, and then maybe some of the macro variables that really need to be addressed at scale to halt and reverse some of the trends around homelessness. So we're going to kind of pass the ball back and forth between each other throughout the course of this, and be able to get a well-rounded perspective from a couple of different angles. So a little bit about Martin v. Boise, which is a huge driving factor in how we at a local level engage in addressing homelessness, particularly chronic homelessness that we see occurring in our streets. First disclaimer is I am not an attorney, so I am not attempting to give any sort of credible legal perspective on Martin v. Boise, but more of a practical kind of operational perspective. So this was a decision in the Ninth Circuit Court, I believe it was in 2019. It surrounded the relevance of the Eighth Amendment to what was central to the case, which is a law in the books in Boise that criminalized the condition of being homeless. The Eighth Amendment, which is included there in the slide, with the critical part underlined with emphasis added there, which is around the cruel and unusual punishment. So the outcome of that case was that it's unconstitutional to criminalize the condition of being homeless, because that essentially amounted to cruel and unusual punishment for a condition of being, as opposed to a conscious act engaged in by an individual. So that really changed everything. The map that you see there highlights the Ninth Circuit Court geography, which is really the Western states. And I think the relevance of that is that this is a precedential decision that applies only to the Ninth Circuit Court. So in our community, we have folks who travel to other parts of the country. They see a different approach being taken on how communities handle homelessness in other parts of the country, come back and they ask, well, why don't you just do that? You know, they're shipping them out in Cleveland, so why don't you just do that here in Vancouver? And the reason is we're under a different legal framework here in Vancouver. And we have different philosophy and different community values, but the legal framework is the one that applies to us, and it doesn't apply in other parts of the country. So in Vancouver, we've seen a very dramatic increase in the rate of unsheltered and chronically homeless individuals. It's more than tripled in the last 8 years. You can see in the graph there, that kind of greenish color is the one that quantifies our chronically unhoused population. We've seen a very dramatic increase in the last few years there. And then we see a trend line there of overall homeless, which includes sheltered, unsheltered, and chronic. That is dramatic since 2015. So, and Nichole, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, thank you. So seeing some similar trends in our area, I would disclose that this tracking methodology is done for the state as a whole and very specific to our what we consider the balance of state continuum of care group, which is really all of the 26 counties that are rural Oregon. So we're seeing overall in that balance of state groups that our homeless population has decreased. But the numbers that we are really focusing and concerned about is that unsheltered population increasing significantly. And then also that chronic element, we're seeing some significant increases there. So figuring out how we can kind of not only manage assisting those that are unsheltered, but helping those who have that chronic status getting out of that cycle.
I thought it'd be helpful to share a little bit of the kinds of media coverage that we're seeing in each of our communities. Here's a few headlines clipped from coverage from multiple sources in Vancouver about homelessness. And this is how much of the public's perception is informed in addition to their own observed experience. We have Clark County residents are struggling to stay housed because of increasing costs and a tight supply. There's always questions about homelessness being a threat to public safety. The visible chronic homelessness is a source of anxiety for many of our housed residents here in Vancouver. The city is ongoing and engaged in an ongoing way around managing encampments. We'll get a little more detail about that in a few minutes. But some coverage about us removing homeless camps, as well as some coverage there about the Safe Stay community work that we're doing to create shelter capacity and some successes there. So mixed bag, a lot of anxiety, a lot of attention in the community, a lot of coverage in our local and regional media about it as well. So.
Thank you. From the Coos Bay side of things, what I've pulled together here is more focused on what we've been doing. One of those big wins, at least we're considering so, is a Coal Bank Village, which is a pallet structure housing up to 24 individuals there. And we're really trying to paint the picture that there's some progress being made and giving pathways to folks making some permanent changes. As much as we can, trying to help feed that media stream with facts to hopefully impact the way our community is viewing homelessness. Obviously, it's very visual out on the streets. So if we can kind of help the storyline stay focused on what's changing. So there was both the story on the village itself, and then also the entity that runs and manages that facility. They also provide a wraparound support facility. They're kind of connected, obviously. So a storyline on what that looks like working in the Devereaux Center is that wraparound support facility. On the next page, I think we're sharing what the Coal Bank Village development kind of entailed, and that was a community effort. So we had some support from other entities providing some financial backing to get the pallet shelters purchased, and then just some volunteers to come in and help get those built. Through this process, we started coordinating kind of some service together, came together with both Coos Bay, City of Coos Bay, City of North Bend, and Coos County to file under the state of Oregon for one of the pilot project programs that the previous governor had established. So we've been kind of working that effort. This is a recent article where we're asking for a second kind of set of funding to continue the work as we see more people coming to the table to want to collaborate and do their part to help the community overcome this challenge. I think that's the end of our news.
Yeah, so it's interesting, the similarity really between the media coverage that we're seeing in Coos Bay and in Vancouver, that the themes are all very, very similar, very in common. And one of the things that we are each navigating in our respective communities is, community expectations and maybe what might be popular views on approach to addressing homelessness, and then the reality. And maybe I'll talk a little bit about expectations and then turn it over to Nichole to talk about the reality. In Vancouver, we hear kind of a common sentiment that this is really something that could be solved by bootstraps. That if folks who are experiencing homelessness could just find employment or engage in more constructive behavior, then they wouldn't be homeless in the first place. That it's a choice. People just want to live that way. We work to educate and raise awareness about the realities and the facts of what contributes to homelessness, and that's not really a major driving factor there. So there's a lot of expectations around enforcement, that if we can just bring the police in there and clear folks out, that'd be a solution to it. Strong perceptions that the homeless population is the cause of crime. That is not the case. In fact, we've seen around one of our emergency shelter projects, the Safe Stay community, we saw a decline in calls for emergency service, and reports of crime declined by 30% in the first year of the operation of that facility. So homelessness does not equal criminal activity, but there is some anxiety that people experience when they see it in the field and in the community, and they begin to make some false connections and assumptions about that. And the other thing that we have to navigate in our roles as the chief executive of our respective organizations is the politics around it, right? We in Vancouver are looking to be as proactive as possible, and we recognize that that many of these expectations and misunderstandings that we see in the community are informing the political environment. We want to be proactive in that environment, not reactive in that environment, so that we are pursuing things that help address particularly chronically unhoused individuals living on the streets in our community, as opposed to being reactive to what ultimately is a political mandate that can be very challenging to enforce. So, Nichole?
Yes, thank you. So very much same, versus small and large. We have those same expectations, that you guys are experiencing. And the reality is we are not treating homelessness as a crime necessarily in our enforcement tactics. Rather, we have focused on education. Our community has, done our required time, place, and manner ordinancing so that folks who are experiencing homelessness know where they can, where it's okay to be resting out there in the public. And our focus for enforcement is really about making sure they understand and are aware it is not criminal activity to take a moment to rest. It's the challenge of making sure our community understands that. I think we have that, the fear and the anger that kind of comes from that other side. We find sometimes can be combated with a little bit of information. It's often a lack of information, understanding. So trying to attack it from that, what's the reality of this circumstance? And then I'm sure everybody has this experience, but we are doing this work from a government perspective in a field we have little to no knowledge and experience in. We are not in a capacity to provide social service. This just isn't something we know. If you want a new street, we can definitely go in and get that done, but this is not where we normally would land. So we're learning, and we're learning as fast as we can because this is a very significant problem in our community. Balancing the needs of both the housed and unhoused is definitely a challenge, and we do see that politically. It's becoming even a base for running for an office. So finding a balance, we're still working on that.
Yeah, if I could echo what Nichole said about the kind of competency of cities to deliver what is a very social service heavy service area in homeless response. We generally are not. Vancouver's experience is the same as what Nichole described. We generally don't have a rich history and deep skill and competency in delivering those kinds of services, but they're what need to be done to meet the community's needs. And so we're figuring out how to do it as we're going. So, we just came out of a pandemic. I think there's some sense that it feels like it was a long time ago, but it really wasn't that long ago. We just came out of a multi-year pandemic, and in Vancouver anyway, we had some challenges that developed over the course of that pandemic that aggravated what we're facing today. The CDC guidance, the Centers for Disease Control, and our local health authority advised that if there were encampments, homeless encampments in the community, we should really minimize disruption as a way to minimize the risk of disease spread during the pandemic. We had reduced engagement with those for the same reason, right? We have outreach workers who want to minimize their potential exposure to a contagious disease. We had an increase in the unhoused population during that same period. You saw that in an earlier graphic. And then we also had the onset significantly of the opioid and fentanyl crisis, all happening during a few year period of the pandemic. And those are the conditions emerging from the pandemic that we have been trying to manage through. So would you like to add anything here, Nichole?
I would very much echo, what you've stated there. Obviously, the scale is different again, but it's similar experiences.
So Vancouver's homeless response strategy is kind of multifaceted. We are looking to build increased shelter capacity. We're doing that largely through what we call our safe stay communities, which are, you can see on the image here, it's the pallet shelters. I believe Coos Bay is using that same pallet shelter product for some of their approaches. These are up to 40 bed, 20 unit, 40 bed shelters. They're managed 24/7 with wraparound services on site. We have 2 of them that are fully operational. We have 2 of them that are under active development construction right now and anticipate being open before Thanksgiving. We have budget capacity for one more. So we will have a total of 5 safe stay communities operating throughout the community. We have a safe park program where folks who are living in their vehicles are all parking in a staffed, safe, supportive environment where there's sanitary facilities on site and outreach. The social service workers can engage with those individuals. We have our homeless assistance response team, which is a multi faceted team that includes outreach workers, solid waste and hazard abatement workers, our police, and then we partner with nonprofits in the community to work with the HEART team to engage people who are experiencing homelessness with social services that can help move them towards stability and ultimately becoming housed. I'll talk a little bit about our encampment management strategy in a minute. And then we just recently, earlier this year, established a community court, which meets every Friday. It meets at a local recovery cafe, which is a nonprofit location run and focused on serving a population that is in recovery from substance use disorders. And this is a way to connect people who maybe are technically violating the law because of their behavior while experiencing homelessness. We connect them with community court, which then allows us to immediately connect them with service providers. We've had tremendous success with that program and are looking at potentially scaling it up to add additional days, additional court capacity. Our encampment management strategy is really focused on accountability, leading with outreach, connecting folks with services, housing and shelter, mental and behavioral health issues. We look for health and safety issues, monitoring those, cleaning them up, removing solid waste and other hazardous waste from those. And then we follow with enforcement. And I mentioned the community court. We provide property storage, and then we work in partnership with our police to work with folks who may be a little more resistant on the front end in engaging with the outreach and maybe are engaging in behavior that actually does creep over into the criminal territory. So, would you like to add anything here, Nichole?
I'm not sure that I have too much to add. We haven't really delved into this this arena of managing camps. Where we find them are typically in our parks that we've deemed as not a space that could happen in. So we're still kind of strategizing there on how we can, if they're all in one space, that's almost a better solution. And so if we can kind of work around that somehow, we're working on it still.
So higher rents, right? Constrained housing supply, that translates into increased risk of being displaced from housing. And this is some analysis done by the Washington State Department of Commerce, which is a state agency that works with cities on housing issues, just from earlier this month. And you can see on this map that the darker the color, the higher the risk of displacement is. And so in Vancouver, we have significant portions of the city that are at moderate or high risk of housing displacement. And that directly translates into risk of becoming homeless and underscores the importance of us working to keep people in housing if they are already housed and then rapidly rehousing people who do become displaced. Talk about the Coos Bay and Oregon experience there.
Yes. So again, this is statewide data and just kind of feeds off of that severely rent burdened kind of discussion already brought up. But just looking at that lowest tier there, so those who are in the 0 to 30%, that extremely low income level, across the state, 81% of them are falling into that severely rent burden. So spending more than 50% of their income towards rent. And then, across the spectrum, there's still a significant portion as you step into the next level of severely 39%, but even at moderate, they're spending 31 to 50%. And that's out even, at 31, that's kind of outside of what a traditional best practice, I guess. If you were going to look at a budgeting model for a household, a third of your income goes towards your home. And so the greater majority of our folks are working outside of what a best practice model is.
Yeah, so in Washington, we're engaged in statewide, cities across the state are engaged in looking at what the next 20 years of their land use planning needs to be. We're all in comprehensive plan update in some mode or another. And again, the Department of Commerce done some analysis of what the statewide needs are by area median income. And over the next 20 years, we'll need to build 1.1 million new homes in the state of Washington. In addition, we'll need more than 91,000 emergency shelter beds or emergency temporary housing. And you can see on the slide there's a breakdown of what the area median income thresholds are and how many units are needed in each area there. And you can see that about half of all of that housing will need to be affordable to households that are earning 50% or below of the area median income. So more than 500,000 homes statewide will need to be built that are affordable at that 50% AMI or below. The systems that are in place to support development of housing at that income level almost exclusively are public or nonprofit. They rely heavily on scarce housing tax credit systems and public funding. And when you look at the scale of that, there will need to be some very significant either infusions of resources into the existing systems or reform of those systems so that we can actually get to a scale of construction of housing that is affordable at that level. When we look at the Vancouver share of that statewide, we are early indications, early analysis suggests that it's about 40,000 units will need to be built in Vancouver over the next 20 years that are affordable at that level of 50% AMI or below. So that's a very tall order. We don't have a lot of vacant developable land here. We are, unlike Coos Bay, we're flat, but we are also substantially built out. So it's about infill and shifting the kind of housing that's built from predominantly single family, which is what it's been over the last 20 to 40 years, to be more multifamily and apartments in that middle housing.
So a similar story on this side. It's amazing to find such similarities when you look at drastically different sized communities. But so our storyline here, again, statewide versus what we see directly in Coos Bay. We are about 85,000 homes short of meeting the need in that lowest bracket, again, in that 30% of median family income. And then when you add in that next level, which we still believe is a concerning number, there is that additional 16,000. And again, stepping up, we're still, meeting gap issues in housing supply. And like Eric stated, Coos Bay is topographically challenged. So much of our available land is very hilly, and that makes it challenging for infrastructure. Often infrastructure is kind of that, does it pencil or not, for projects to come in, and that is prohibiting that. We are limited on buildable land supply and doing what we can to increase densities in areas. I think our last multifamily, significantly sized multifamily development was a couple decades ago. So trying to find ways we can encourage that here locally to get more bang for our buck on the land that's still left.
Yeah, it really is fascinating how size of community isn't making much of a difference here. The issues are the same, right? We're trying to tackle them and figure out how to close some of these very significant gaps that if they aren't addressed, they translate into some hugely significant challenges to our communities over the next 10 to 20 years. So in Washington, there's a couple of new laws that were just passed by the legislature earlier this year to try and address this huge housing gap. They've collectively been casually referred to as the middle housing bills. But one of them is House Bill 1110, which was really an unprecedented preemption of local zoning for cities that plan under the Growth Management Act in the state. We are all now required to I should say, communities over 25,000 are now all required to plan for and permit 4 units per lot, not per acre, but per lot, everywhere on eligible property, which is residential property. And then if affordability is included, then we need to allow up to 6 units per lot. And if it is near a major transit stop, we need to allow 6 units per lot. So that is a dramatic shift away from what has historically been exclusive single family zoning, where the only thing you could build there was a single family home, to a new paradigm where every lot is eligible for at a minimum of 4 units and up to 6, depending on proximity to transit and affordability. And then in addition to that, our legislature passed House Bill 1337, which is the accessory dwelling unit law that, again, was a preemption of local laws. It now requires cities to allow no less than 2 ADUs per lot, whereas previously it was typically 1. It loosened maximum size standards, loosened dimensional standards, preempts the requirement for street improvements, preempts the requirement for owner occupancy, does provide for condominium sales of accessory dwelling units. So that's another path to home ownership. Preempts design review, also parking requirements and impact fees. So it removes a lot of the barriers or the headwinds to developing ADUs as a way to increase the supply of housing, and ultimately translates into more density in our communities. So, are you seeing anything similar, Nichole?
So being maybe a smaller city, I'm not seeing those same requirements. However, we have acknowledged just within Coos Bay that there are areas where we could maybe loosen up some of it by choice rather than waiting for regulation. We haven't gone to this extreme just yet, but we are, ADUs are within our code. We are looking at, lot size, allowing you to go, more density in your lot, filling up that land mass a little bit more, and things like that. We are aware we have a very housing focused leadership at the state now, so it's very possible we'll see some in the new session that makes some of these requirements. I'm hoping we're ahead of the game, and that doesn't get twisted too tight for us.
And then our overall strategy is really kind of fourfold here in Vancouver to address the housing supply issue. We got policy, which is reforming our land use and zoning. Just talked a little bit about some of the state laws that preempt that, but also we're heading in that direction anyway to increase density, increase the supply through one of our most powerful tools, which is that regulatory or policy on land use. We have a direct investment strategy, which is putting public resources directly into building more affordable housing. In Vancouver, our voters passed a housing levy in 2017 that was originally $6 million a year for 7 years. It was just renewed and expanded earlier this year to be for $10 million a year for 10 years. And that levy also provides for housing construction, homelessness prevention, and home ownership programs. So it's primarily at a housing production focus, but it does have these other elements that are built aimed at stabilizing households and creating a path to building household wealth through ownership. Another part of our direct investment strategy is we do offer some incentives that, such as a multifamily tax exemption in some areas of the city. If you're building market rate housing under those exemptions, you need to contribute a fee in lieu of taxes that we then use to fund direct investment in affordable housing. And then we're an entitlement community, and we get direct allocation of community development block grant funds and home funds from U.S. Department of Housing or Urban Development. We have incentives. I mentioned the multifamily tax exemption program, which provides limited term tax exemption for new construction in certain designated areas in the city. It is it's a richer exemption for longer if you build affordable. It is a less rich exemption if you build market rate, but all of it is geared towards increasing supply. And then we have a system development charge forgiveness and abatement for affordable housing developments. And then on the process side, we recognize that a vast majority of housing is built by the private sector, and the private sector is private capital that will go where they can most reliably and quickly convert that private capital into additional profit. And part of that is informed by the process. So we're looking to be predictable, reliable, fast, and to build and reinforce a reputation for being a place where you can be successful in navigating that process as we see housing get developed, more and more housing get developed here. So how about you, Nichole?
Again, I think there's some similarities we have here in Coos Bay. We've been through some land use review, looking at policy to make it easier to work within, to encourage development. We unfortunately do not have a housing levy, but one of the things I'm learning here is a lot of great tools that haven't made it our way just yet. We are and have over the last few years participated in a CDBG grant, which was aimed towards keeping folks in their homes. So rehabilitating and making them safe. So if you have some, front entrances that need, stabilized walkways, even energy efficiency kinds of things, just keeping the house housed. Also, we are right as we speak working on that multifamily tax exemption here locally for Coos Bay. We're focusing obviously on larger units, so 6+ units. We're just working with those overlapping taxing districts. It's a process that has to get buy-in. And we have for, as long as I've been at the city, we have not had system development charges, understanding that those were definitely an impediment to development, often causing projects to just not pencil out. So we have process that we're working on. We understand some streamlining would again keep that investment here local, which is what we're hoping for.
All right. So we started with the Martin v. Boise decision, right, which then was a significant shift in how we address visible homelessness in our communities. Recognize some of the aggravating factors as we've been navigating that, particularly the pandemic conditions and approach, and emerging from the pandemic, and then the onset of the severe opioid crisis. And then recognizing that ultimately a root cause here is the lack of affordable housing, which is a supply issue. And so we're looking at these macro level policy interventions that will allow at scale in each of our communities to address that root cause while working to mitigate and manage the symptoms associated with living under the Martin v. Boise decision. So Any closing remarks from you, Nichole?
I think that's a great wrap up. I just would, add to this. I really appreciate being part of this conversation. Sometimes it feels like you're working a little bit on your own and an island, and that the challenges are different in other places. But what this hopes is we're all in this challenging battle together. Trying to meet the needs of our community, and that's every individual that we have living within our space. So I appreciate the time today.
Nicely stated. Thank you, Nichole. All right.